All right, so I just watched 5 hours of legal arguments for day one of the impeachment. So you don't have to. So here's my hopefully 10-minute video to just kind of put everything in perspective and hopefully get you informed about what happened yesterday and why, for one side, it was a total disaster. Hey, what's going on? My name is Nathan Lawyer. Welcome to the Brody's Bunch, where you are the jury of today's content. Today, we're going to look at day one of the impeachment trial and see what happened. Now, yesterday, day one, the question of the day was this impeachment constitutional, right? Was this even a constitutional issue? The reason why is because Trump isn't in office. He's a former official. So the question is, can the House of Representatives impeach a former official? And can the Senate convict a former official when that official's not in office? So that was the topic of the day. That's what the motion to dismiss was about. And if 51 senators believe that the Senate didn't have jurisdiction over former officials who are not in office, the trial will be over. So here's my reactions to the arguments in that context. So let's start with the House managers, since they presented first. They came out swinging. They came out fantastic. Let me set the scene up. Right out the gate, they played a video of the insurrection. Now, I think a lot of people underplay how powerful that 13-minute video was to these jurors. Don't forget, the jurors or the senators who were sitting in judgment were victims of the assault. They were inside the building when people were trying to get in. And that video made them relive it. Remember, it was these senators who were on the other side of the door that this mob was trying to get into. The fear, the anger, that personal vulnerability. That's what all of those senators in that room had to experience in that moment. You made the victim relive the events, and your victims happen to be your jurors. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. And you know how powerful it was because you couldn't hear a pin drop in the room. Don't forget, those staffers were the ones who also experienced this. Some of these people's families experienced this, as you'll hear later from one of the House managers. That is how they opened up. And in law, they always tell you, start strong, end strong. That's starting strong. So the Democrats, after leveraging that emotional piece, then went into their arguments about whether former officials can be impeached by the Senate. Now, just so we're clear on the facts, Trump was impeached while he was in office for conduct that he did while he was in office. So the impeachment part of it is not the issue. It is whether he can be disqualified after he left office. So the Democrats started with precedent and give us some history. Fact, every impeachment of every government official that occurred in the framers' lifetime were of former officials. That's a powerful statement. That's what the Democrats hit. Again, let me read it again. Every impeachment of a government official that occurred in the framers' lifetime was of a former official. So if we're starting off making the argument, can former officials be impeached? Then it seems like yes, right? If we're talking about what the framers meant. Second, another piece of precedent, the impeachment of William Belknap. Now, Belknap was the Secretary of War, which is equivalent to today's Defense Secretary. Now, Belknap resigned before he could be impeached. Now, after his impeachment, Belknap did argue that since he was a former official, the Senate didn't have jurisdiction to hold a trial or impeach him. Now, the Senate convened the trial and for 2 weeks wrestled with this question. They had hearings, they did everything. And the Senate agreed that it retained impeachment jurisdiction over former officials. And then they had a full trial. Now, it's true, Belknap was acquitted at the end of the trial. They went through the whole process of a Senate impeachment trial for a former official. Powerful precedent. Then they framed the argument that the former president couldn't be impeached as a January exception, essentially making the slippery slope argument that a president, he can commit treason and bribery on his last day, and there's nothing that the Senate or the legislature can do. And if he's not both impeached and convicted by the Senate, then there's no remedy. That's the Democrats' argument. Then the Democrats expose some of Trump's key witnesses. First, Jonathan Turley, who was an expert witness for their side. Jonathan Turley says this impeachment is unconstitutional. So what did they do? they got John Turley's writings and made him look like a hypocrite. Listen to this.
Up until just a few weeks ago, he was a recognized champion of the view that the Constitution authorizes the impeachment of former officials, and that is Professor Jonathan Turley. Let me show you what I mean. These are his words. First, in a very detailed study, thorough study, he explained that, quote, the resignation from office does not prevent trial on articles of impeachment. That's Professor Turley's words. Same piece, he celebrated the BELKNAP trial. He described it as a corrective measure that helped the system regain legitimacy. He wrote another article. He's written several on this topic. This one is actually, it's a 146-page study, very detailed. And in that study, he said, quote, that the decision in BELKNAP was correct in its view that impeachment historically had extended to former officials, such as Warren Hastings, who you heard Lead Manager Raskin describe. In fact, as you can see, Professor Turley argued that the House could have impeached and the Senate could have tried Richard Nixon after he resigned. His quote on this, very telling, quote, future presidents could not assume that mere resignation would avoid a trial of their conduct in the United States Senate. Finally, last quote from Professor Turley, that no man in no circumstance can escape the account which he owes to the laws of his country. Not my words, not Lead Manager Raskin's words, Professor Jonathan Turley's words.
Now, if you watch Viva, if you watch Bond, if you watch Nick, they all talk about John Turley, but John Turley has changed his tune. So remember, their key witness, Trump's lawyer's key witness, key expert, has now been refuted. The Democrats went to a witness that they cited in their brief, who said that they misquoted him deceptively. Look, this is what they said.
They did cite one professor, though. Professor Kalt is an expert in this field, who they claimed agreed with them that the only purpose of impeachment is removal. You can take Professor Kalt's word for it, the professor they cited in their brief filed yesterday, because he tweeted about it. And on the screen here, this is what he had to say. I'm not going to read through it in great detail. I'll just simply give you the highlights. President Trump's brief cites my 2001 article on late impeachment a lot, but in several places, they misrepresent what I wrote quite badly. There are multiple examples of such flat-out misrepresentations. They didn't have to be disingenuous and misleading like this. This key constitutional scholar relied on by President Trump.
At the end of the presentation, the Democrats crushed Trump's legal team's arguments so wonderfully that they had to, in that moment, change tactics. They had to, no, we can't cite to Turley, right? They just destroyed him. We can't cite to this other legal precedent that we said from this expert, right? Because they just crushed him too. He says he doesn't agree with us. So at halftime, they had to change their whole presentation. Here's Nick Recchietta explaining it.
I think Castor betrays that, actually, when he said, and this is a terrible thing to say, he said, I'm going to be candid here. We changed our entire strategy. So on the fly today, in response to the Democrat House managers' impeachment arguments, because he thought they did a really good job. That was like,
but
and I think it played out like he's admitting that they combined that with how bad his presentation was. And what he just did was admit that they did so well that they blew my existing speech out of the water. So I just rambled at you for 30 minutes.
There are better ways to phrase that.
So now Trump's team, after being kind of smacked in the face, seemed to be unprepared and came in and made a couple of arguments. The first argument was that the House didn't follow any proper rules of due process in enacting the impeachment. So the president didn't get to challenge new witnesses, didn't get to testify, didn't get to do anything, right? They just brought up impeachment articles and voted on them. That was their first due process argument. The second argument is that the Chief Justice should be presiding here. Trump was impeached as president. you are technically impeaching someone for what they did as president. So their argument is that Trump was president when he was impeached, and the Chief Justice should be presiding over this trial. And they do concede that Trump at this point is a former president and that Joe Biden is currently president, because you can only have one president at a time. And essentially, this is an impeachment trial for a private citizen. So the Chief Justice not being there makes this unconstitutional. The next argument was that this is a bill of attainder. Now, a bill of attainder, I'm reading this from Wiki. It's an act of a legislature declaring a person or group of persons guilty of some crime by punishing them, often without a trial. The legislature will pass a law, and Trump's team says this is equivalent to a bill of attainder. This is a trial by legislature, which is prohibited in the Constitution. And lastly, they argue a slippery slope argument. If you can impeach President Trump as a former official, where does it end? You can impeach Jimmy Carter. You can go back and impeach Andrew Johnson, right? 100 years, 10 years, where does it end? You had the two arguments, and the Senate then voted. So in a vote of 56 to 44, the Senate decided, as they did in the BELKNAP trial, that the Senate had jurisdiction and can proceed with the trial. Now, I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. This was not a good day for President Trump's legal team. They got utterly destroyed. It was so bad that Trump loyalist Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy flipped his vote and said, yes, based on what I saw here, this was constitutional. Curious.
I said I'd be an impartial juror. Anyone listening to those arguments, the House managers were focused, they were organized, they relied upon both precedent, the Constitution, and legal scholars. They made a compelling argument. President Trump's team were disorganized. They did everything they could but to talk about the question at hand. And when they talked about it, they kind of glided over it, almost as if they were embarrassed of their arguments. Now, if I'm an impartial juror, and one side's doing a great job, and the other side's doing a terrible job on the issue at hand, as an impartial juror, I'm going to vote for the side that did the good job.
What does it mean for conviction?
I don't know. We haven't heard that yet. I'm an impartial juror.
Why do you think the Trump defense team did a terrible job?
Did you listen to it?
I did.
Okay, then it speaks for itself.
I found Kastner hard to follow for sure. Other Republicans have praised Chauvin. Is that your feeling of things, or did you think that
Again,
his
if you listen to it, it speaks for itself. It was disorganized, random, had nothing. They talked about many things, but they didn't talk about the issue at hand. And so if I'm an impartial juror and I'm trying to make a decision based upon the facts as presented on this issue, then the House managers did a much better job.
Senator, how about the video of the mob attack on the Capitol?
That is not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is it constitutional to impeach a president who's left office? And the House managers made a compelling, cogent case, and the president's team did not.
Even Trump's lawyers said that the Democrats did an outstanding job. So at the end of the day, I still don't think the Democrats have enough to convict Trump. But they are doing a better job at prosecuting the case. And if day one is any indication of what's going to go on forward, then I think President Trump's legal team has a huge problem. Leave your comments below. Let me know how you feel. My name is Nate the Lawyer. I'm out. Peace.